Now inside of that body element that we just made, it's going to be important to divide certain sections so that we can get to them easier later on in styling or in programming. It's going to be easier to find these certain spots of our body page. So we can divide the body into certain things called divs, which are dividers or divisions. And what these do is they are kind of mini wrappers that wrap certain parts of our code together. So we can make a div for maybe the header. We can make a div section for maybe a side note, a div for the footer. I want to show you guys how this is done, and just so we can get used to seeing these divs in action. Later on in styling, we can apply classes to these divs and IDs to these divs so that we can style each section in particular. Or with JavaScript, we can assign an ID to a div, and then we can use a query selector to get to that specific div and maybe add some behavior programming to that too. Let's take a look at the div in action. Now in my code here, I have just the body, and we saw before that I can write, just really anything I want. This is my last name right here. But anything I want here, I can just write. We'll notice here that regardless of the spacing I have in the code editor, when I go to preview this, it's just going to be kind of all on one line. And that's because no styling is involved, no divisions are involved, really. Everything's just kind of on one mess. With HTML, regardless of the spacing you have in your code editor, what really matters is the stuff that's in between tags. So just to give you a little preview, if I wrap this in a p tag, which is a paragraph tag, and then I also wrap this guy in a p tag, I expect this to be styled a little bit differently. Yep, and we can see here that everything gets their own line. And we're going to be looking at that more in styling, but for right now, let's delete everything we have, open this up again, and let's make a div. So I want to section off part of this body for my little intro on the top. Maybe I can do div, maybe I can give that an ID of intro. Go ahead and close that off. So now, when we go to write anything for our intro section, we can write it inside of this div, which will be distinct from our body. We can also write maybe a div for our footer. Cool. So we now have two distinct sections of our body element. So now, moving forward, as I said before, all the stuff that I write for my intro will be included in this div with the ID of intro. Anything that I write for the footer will be included within the div with the ID of footer. And just so we can see this in action, let me go ahead and write let me spell things correctly too. Now we can see here that each division, each div gets its own line. So now we know that these divs are working, we know that these divs are actually in fact divided. That'll be different than writing this is the intro and this is the footer, which will just be plopped together in one section. Cool. So let me go back and let's see what we're going to be working with going forward here. When making my portfolio, I'm going to divide my stuff into kind of three sections. So I'm going to start with the div. I'm going to give it an ID of header. I'm going to make a div for the content. And then I'll make a div for maybe the links on the bottom. And just so I don't have to do this later on, go ahead and I'm going to make a div called wrapper. And I'm going to surround all my other divs inside of that div. Now this isn't required in any sense. I just want to know that later on I can now style this div wrapper independently from my body, which just maybe a little bit preference to you. You can give this wrapper div maybe a max width or a background color that won't affect your body. And this will make a little bit more sense when we look at CSS. But going forward here, let's take a look at what we have. We have a head that says my cool portfolio page. We have the Medicare set. We have the body. Inside of the body we have the wrapper div. And inside of that wrapper div is where all of our content will go, such as the head content, the content, and the links content. So in the next video, we're going to be looking at 3 new tags. The paragraph tag, which we have seen a little bit in use before. We're going to look at the several header tags that are involved in HTML. And then we're going to look at the list tags that we can use to actually create lists, which are the unordered list and ordered lists. That'll be in the next video, and that'll be actually getting started creating the content for our portfolio page. It'll be fun. I hope to see you guys there. Hopefully I can get this video up in a reasonable time and not waste a month.